Okay, we're continuing in the Hachaim. We're in Parshat Vayigash, Perik Memvav, Pasuk Gimel. So Yaakov is about to go down to Mitzrayim to see Yosef for the first time after many years, after he found out that Yosef was still alive. Hashem appears to Yaakov and tells him, don't be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim, because in Mitzrayim I will make you into a great nation. And the Hachaim is going to point out that it seems to be that only in Mitzrayim would Klal Yisrael turn into a great nation. So the Hachaim is going to ask 4 questions as to what exactly was Hakadosh Baruch Hu trying to give to Yaakov. What was Yaakov so afraid of going down to Mitzrayim that Hashem had to appear to him to tell him, don't be afraid. So it says the Hachaim, Tzarech Ladas, Mahu hamayr shahaya liYaakov b'yiridas Mitzrayim. What exactly was the fear that Yaakov had to go down to Mitzrayim? V'im mayr hagalus, and if you're going to say that Yaakov was afraid to go down because he didn't want to go into Galus, and Kain Mahi Kavonas Hashem B'Imra Al Tira, then Hashem telling him don't be afraid doesn't really help him. How is that going to take away the fear that Yaakov had? Right? If I tell you you have to go into exile, you're going to have to leave your house, and you're going to go through excuse me, you're going to go through a difficult situation, right? Saying don't be afraid doesn't really help. And if the intent of Hashem was to tell him that there won't be Galus in Mitzrayim, we know that's not the case. So Hashem wouldn't tell him, don't be afraid there's not Galus, if in actuality, because Klal Yisrael went through a very difficult time, through tremendous tsar and tsaris and big yisurim. So Hashem wouldn't say, don't be afraid, it's not going to be so bad, when in the actuality it was terrible. Why did Hashem have to tell Klal Yisrael, to tell Yaakov that Klal Yisrael is going to be a great nation? Not nisina tam zula asar samari. How is that going to remove whatever fear that Yaakov had? Why does it have to say that in Mitzrayim, like we mentioned before, there is where Klal Yisrael will become a great nation? Why couldn't Hashem make Klal Yisrael into a great nation somewhere else? Why specifically did it have to be Mitzrayim? Why does it have to say into a great nation? Like, what were we coming from that Hashem had to say you will become into a great nation? Could have said simply, I will make you into a great nation. So the Hachaim explains that Yaakov was afraid, as we're going to see, that the Golus would actually start with him. So Achein, Kavonas HaKosef hi litzad mashakodam mi'hayido la'ovez ki nigzra gezerah hagolus alheim. We know that Yaakov Avinu already knew from Yitzchak and Avraham that Klal Yisrael is going to go into Golus. As it says, Ki ger yezarach, Hashem already told Avraham Avinu that Klal Yisrael is going to be a stranger in a different country. Umin hastam, and logic would dictate that Avraham told Yitzchak, Yitzchak told Yaakov. As we know, whatever Hashem taught Yaakov, whatever Noach taught, Avram, whatever Noach taught Avram, and whatever Avram learned from Shem, he taught Yitzchak, Yitzchak taught Yaakov, Yaakov told the Shvatim, specifically, or a lot, to Yosef HaTzadik. Like we know in Parshat Vayigash, Yaakov Avinu wanted to reveal the end of the Galus when the Mashiach would come, just like Yitzchak told Yaakov and Avram told Yitzchak, and he wasn't able to. Right? The reason why he wasn't able to is a different shir in itself, but we see that they all learned from the Avos, and therefore it's logical that Yaakov already knew that Klal Yisrael would have to go into Galus. Asher al ken kesheroi Yaakov shev Mitzrayim. When Yaakov Avinu saw what was going to happen by going down to Mitzrayim, Kisham Yisbulu Banav Galus, and he knew that there would be the place of Galus. Lazek Kishiyorad Yor Lenafshay. When he was forced to go down, he feared that the Galus would start with him. Now, even though Avram also went to Mitzrayim, when Avram went to Mitzrayim, Hashem did not yet tell him that Klal Yisrael will go into Galus. In addition, Avram at that point did not have any children yet, so you couldn't say, right, that your children would be into Galus. Yitzchak never went to Mitzrayim. Yitzchak went to Galus but he knew it was for a short period of time, and he went to Eretz Plishtim. And even if you want to say that he thought it may have gone to Galus, he didn't have any children yet. He only had children later on. So Yaakov was the first of the Avos to go down to a different country with his children and grandchildren. So at that point, Yaakov understood that if I have to take my entire family, including my children and grandchildren, the Galus is starting. And therefore he thought that the Galus would start from him. And he would be subject to the terrible tsar that would come about. Gam Yorei Hayashema Yikav Shom Beretz Tmeya. Yaakov was also afraid that he would die and be buried in Mitzrayim. And that's why Yaakov went to great lengths to have Yosef promise him that he would not be buried there. Asher, and therefore, Al-Kenigla Elav Hashem. And therefore, to remove these two specific fears, Hashem told him, Anochi Elokei Avicha. Niskavim ba'amir zu, ki kashem she'avicha loitam shibud v'inoi, just like Yaakov, Hashem told Yaakov, just like Avram and Yitzchak did not experience any tsar of the galus, k'mayken ata al tira. So too you have nothing to fear. Don't be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim. You will live there in peace. K'mayken at, right? Hagam she'ata yod Mitzrayim. You don't have to worry about it. Now, there's always a very important question, right? Once Yaakov went to Mitzrayim, it was already the second year of the famine. Yaakov then gave Paroi a blessing, a bracha, and the famine was over. Correct? So the obvious question is, at that point, why did Yaakov go back to Eretz Yisrael? The whole purpose of him going to Mitzrayim was that Yosef would be able to support the family. Okay, now that the famine is over, let's go back. Why did he stay? Right? So, and to the concept, right, that Yaakov might plan to go back to Eretz Yisrael when the right opportunity would come, which actually would be after the years of the famine, right? Which means it could be that Yaakov's original plan was to go down to Mitzrayim for 5 years, right? He knew, I guess from Ruach Hakadosh, or maybe there was a message from Yosef that the famine is going to be for another 5 years. So Yaakov said, okay, he gathered his family, he says, we're going to Mitzrayim for 5 years. After 5 years, don't worry, we're coming back. So therefore Hashem told him, no, you're not coming back. You have to stay in Mitzrayim, because you're going to be a great nation in Mitzrayim. So that actually was a message to Yaakov, you can't go up. You're stuck, you're sort of stuck there. Now that you're going down, you're not coming back. I want to specifically make you into a great nation in Mitzrayim. That, once Yaakov got that message, he knew, right, that there was no going back. That basically until Hashem took them out, they were stuck in Mitzrayim. So far, so good? Okay, so now the question is, why specifically did we have to go to Mitzrayim? So we know that Klal Yisrael had to go into Galus. Hashem told Avram Avinu. Very good, so why Mitzrayim? Go somewhere else. Go back to Bavel, where Klal Yisrael, where Avram came from. Right? Go to other places, wherever the world at that point was settled. Why specifically Mitzrayim? Ula haskil al davar aktim imre kodesh u arashbi v'anshe soidish amru. Hachaim says, I'm going to now tell you secrets from Reb Shimon bar Yochai. And this will also explain to us what is Klal Yisrael's job in the world, right? What is our job in Galus, right? The obvious job in Galus is for us to get back to Yimei Mashiach, back to Eretz Yisrael. But what is our job in Galus? And specifically, what is our job in general? What is the purpose? Right? This is a multifaceted statement, but what is one of the main purposes of us learning Torah and doing mitzvahs? Now, one of the number one on the list is because we have to do what Hashem told us to do. Correct? Hashem commanded us to learn Torah. Hashem commanded us to do mitzvahs, so that's what we have to do. But on a secret level, what is the function? What do doing the mitzvahs and learning Torah actually accomplish? Kitam hagalus hu levar chelkei hakdusha hamufuzorim b'anfei haklipa. The reason of the Golus is that Klal Yisrael has a job, is to gather all the sparks of Kedusha that are scattered in the Tzad HaTumah. So let's take a step back in order to understand. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world and created Adam Arishon, for the first few moments of Adam and Chava's life, the world was in a perfect state. Now Adam actually was an embodiment and had his neshama was made up of every single member of Klal Yisrael's neshama. Klal Yisrael is made up of 600,000 root neshamas. And we've learned this concept many times, that it's true that there's millions and millions of Jews in the world, but it could be a lot of us come from specific parts of the neshama, right? They say that the Arizal, the Baal Shem Tov, the Reb Shimon Yochai came from the head of Adam Arishon, right? Others say that our generation comes from the heel of Adam Arishon, right? Whatever that means. But if you take the spiritual aspect of the neshama and combine them all in together, it would form Adam Arishon. And then when Adam Arishon did an Aveira, right, and he broke the Kedusha, right, he removed the Kedusha from its source, from Hashem, that caused the concept of breaking of the perfect world. Our job now is to, through Torah and mitzvahs, become like a magnet to attract the Kedusha. Right, this is the concept of the Daled Gullus. We go from one place to another place to another place. Once we collected all the Kedusha there, we get kicked out of that nation. And as you see in history, every nation that we were in and we got kicked out, they were no longer a superpower. They no longer ever came to the same level where they were, because the Tumah part of that country has nothing to be yonik from. So therefore, we now have to move on to the next place. The best example I could explain is when we left Mitzrayim to go to Eretz Yisrael, we only were supposed to be in the Golus, in the desert, for a few months. We were supposed to go from Mitzrayim to Har Sinai, from Har Sinai straight to Eretz Yisrael. Because we did the Aveira, right, of the Meraglim, we lost our high level of Kedusha, and we were forced to wander in the desert for 40 years. Right? And Hachaim talks about this as well. Why 40 years? Because we had to now spend the next 40 years gathering all the Kedusha in the Midbar. If we would have remained on that super high level that we were when we got the Torah, those next few weeks, we would have collected all the Kedusha and we would have went straight into Eretz Yisrael. We would have been like a super magnet. We would have been able to easily collect the Kedusha. But because we did an Aveira and we dropped the level, we had to now actually work a lot harder. So therefore, Mitzrayim, which was the epicenter of Tumah, had the most collection of Kedusha. Right? Obviously, what's the fuel of Tumah? Kedusha. Tumah can only exist if it has Kedusha. And therefore, Klal Yisrael's job in Mitzrayim was to extract the Kedusha from the Tzad HaKlipa, to bring it back to its rightful place. Once we finished that, we were able to go out. Any questions before we continue? Okay, so let's see it inside and we'll try to explain it again as we continue. Our job is to basically put back the pieces that Adam Arishon broke. Now, Mitzrayim, for reasons that Hashem decided, was the epicenter of Tumah, was the greatest place of idolatry, of Tumah, right? Paro told Moshe Rabbeinu, don't think that we are amazed by your witchcraft. Every kindergarten kid in Mitzrayim could do what you could do. Why is that? Because it was the center of witchcraft. Sham toikef hatumah. Sham hi shvias chelke hakdusha harabim vatzumim. And therefore, it was the place that had the most and most powerful aspects of Kedusha. The rule is that the greater level of impurity is Yir Bikirba Chelke Kedusha. And he also, if you look at the places that Klal Yisrael was in exile, they were actually the biggest Rishonim in the world. If you go through it, they were the biggest nations that were involved in idolatry, in Averis of all different types. Why? Because the greater the Averis, the greater the Kedusha. That started from the time of Adam Rishon. Sholta shifcha ra b'nitzayt kedusha. The evil shifcha, now, that refers to the impure forces, the tzad hatoma, when she had the ability to attack Adam Rishon because he did an Avera. Remember, when we're learning Torah and we're doing mitzvahs, we're connected to Hashem. The second we do an Avera, we're disconnected from Hashem to some degree, and we now have the tzad hatoma has the ability to attach itself to us. Right? Ubefrat begolos Mitzrayim. Sorry, I skipped. Ve'enei kol Yisrael azeh v'chol hagolos. And the eyes of the Klal Yisrael are to be focused on this task at hand. That when we go into Golos, we know that we have a job in Golos. And that's why in every Golos there's certain similarities. Every Golos, every nation that we went to Golos, they were the leaders of the world. They were the leaders in commerce, in technology, and at the same time, they were the biggest Balei Averis that there were, right? Today, the biggest place of exile is the United States. The United States is the superpower of the world. And on the other hand, it's also probably the biggest place of Averis in the world. Why? Because they have today the most Kedusha. And therefore, it's our job, when we learn Torah, we do mitzvahs, that we collect and we're pulling out, right? And it would be fair to say that we're coming to the end of how much Kedusha is left in the world in general, but in the United States, right? You start to see when the nations start to shake, that's because the Tumah is starting to lose its hold. It's starting to lose its power. And it starts to get to that position that Klal Yisrael is, forced to leave. And therefore, that the Klal Yisrael that left Mitzrayim were actually the people that their neshamas were trapped in Mitzrayim. Where does the concept of gerim come from? How does a ger become a ger? What motivates him? What inspires him to become a ger? The answer is because really he has a Jewish neshama. The problem is that his neshama was captured when Adam Rishon did an Avera. The neshama was captured by the tzad hatuma. And therefore, why was it captured by the tzad hatuma? Because there's kedusha in it, and the tumah needs kedusha. At a certain point, for a variety of different reasons, that neshama starts to reawaken itself. Could be that the tumah's grasp on it weakens. It could be that certain tefillas, that certain members of his family or people that are related to his neshama strengthens his neshama, and it starts to break loose, and it wants to come back to its source. Right? All of a sudden, you see this individual becomes a ger. Where did it come from? He says, I don't know. I had this unbelievable innate desire to learn the truth, and the truth is in Yiddishkeit. It doesn't make any sense. The answer is it doesn't. The answer is because the neshama started to reawaken itself. It started to loosen itself and become free. And the actual neshamas of the members of Klal Yisrael that stood in Har Sinai were actually trapped in Mitzrayim. And their fathers and grandfathers that were working in Mitzrayim and doing mitzvahs and Mesiras Nefesh pulled them out. Ve'elav Amma Moshe Navi, Hashem umi goy gadol. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu told Hashem, who is like a great nation. This is what Hashem was hinting to Yaakov. Tam shemaskin al yeshivas Yaakov Mitzrayim. That why did Hashem decide that Yaakov should be specifically in Mitzrayim, even after the famine ended? It's because of the great nation that's hidden in Mitzrayim. Hashem told Yaakov, there's a great nation that's captured in Mitzrayim, and only you and your children and grandchildren can pull them out. And if you don't pull them out, they'll be stuck in Mitzrayim forever, or for a long time. And you, Yaakov, have to take it out. V'zulas yiridas Yaakov and tikva lezeh. And without Yaakov going down to Mitzrayim, it would be no hope of ever accomplishing this. Because of the great kedusha that Yaakov had, because he learned Torah, Yishav kol anfi kedusha shasham. Only Yaakov Avinu was able to start the process of starting to pull the neshamas out. Nobody else could have done it. Right? At Tzaddik, besides his kedusha, he has a tremendous ability to inspire other people. How does that happen? Right? You come to a holy person, you feel inspired. What happened? He just looked at you. You sat next to Reb Chaim Kanievsky. You sat next to, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. You sat next to Rashach. You sat next to the Reb Eliyashiv. All of a sudden, you feel inspired because his neshama awakens your neshama. How does it awaken? It starts to pull it, right? And therefore, Yaakov Avinu, because he was the highest level of a tzaddik, more than Avram and Yitzchak, he was able to start the process of pulling these neshamas out of Mitzrayim. The Medrash says that Yaakov Avinu did not die until he had 600,000 descendants. And those 600,000 neshamos were oppressed in Mitzrayim. Now Yaakov understood that Hashem wanted him to stay there. So at this point, Yaakov got the message, don't be afraid, you're not going to suffer the consequences of Galus. And you have to know that you're going into Mitzrayim and you're not coming back alive. And the reason why I want you to go to Mitzrayim, because in Mitzrayim there's a great nation trapped in the Tumah. And only you can take them out. And Hashem promised him, don't worry, I will go down with you and I will take you out. So the last part that Yaakov was afraid that he was going to be buried in Mitzrayim, Hashem told him, don't worry about it. I will make sure that you will come back to Eretz Yisrael and be buried there. And that was Hashem's message to Yaakov Avinu.